2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Years ago, almost to the week, I sat myself down in the office of my academic dean during finals week at the end of my first year of college. It did not occur to me then that the reason you make an appointment with your academic dean during finals week is because something is awry. I give a lot of credit to that dean for not laughing at me when I said, before I leave for summer break, I need to know what I'm doing with my life. I leave in 3 hours. She's a great woman. Instead of laughing, she listened. She listened to me talk about how, though I had enjoyed my classes that year, none of them had really captured my imagination. What I really enjoyed were all the activities. She also heard me say how excited I was to be an RA. She suggested that when I returned in the fall, and not that afternoon, I look into a career path in student affairs. She explained to me that student affairs is all the work that supports a student's development while they're in college. She said that if I pursued that path, I could end up working in financial aid, student activities, residence life, or have a job like hers. I was thrilled. Not only did I have a life plan, but I had a life plan that was going to enable me to stay in college forever and get paid to do so. Perfect. I spent the next 8 years really pursuing that path, making decisions about activities and classes in grad school because I thought they would set me up well for what came next. I began to understand that one of my roles as a student affairs educator was to help students think deeply about who they were, what they wanted, and how they interacted with others. I also came to understand that I would help some students think critically about the decisions they had made, such as the group of 18-year-olds who ended up playing beer pong above my apartment. Fast forward to 2006, and I am in what I think is my dream job. I'm in my first position out of grad school. On paper, it looks perfect. I'm living in a community that I wanted to be a part of. I have relocated closer to friends and family and the ocean. I love the ocean. I know I live in the mountains, but I do love the ocean. I was also working at a great institution with a lot of resources and with just fascinating students. And yet, if you had been living my experience with me, you would have seen that something was awry. You would have seen that it took me much longer to get my work done than the workload I actually had, and I often struggled to get out of bed. You would have seen that my regular evening routine consisted of going from work straight to kickboxing, then swinging by the dining hall to pick up sushi. It was a great school, they had a lot of resources, even the dining hall sushi was pretty good. And then I would get in the shower with a beer. Not because I like beer, but because the opening of the beer bottle was narrow enough that not a lot of shower water got in there, especially when I felt so overwhelmed that all I wanted to do was sit down. It took a number of cycles of that before I realized that something was amiss. I wasn't showing up the way I wanted. I was not the professional I wanted to be. And so I set to work fixing it. I had this bookshelf of resources and notes from grad school, and I probably went through all of them trying to find the solution. I thought about interventions I would make. I thought about requests I could make of my supervisor. And it took me a while to realize that all of my attention was focused outward, on the institution, on the department, and on my colleagues. I had forgotten that if you're in a system, you're part of a system, and if there's an issue at hand, you're likely a contributing factor. I can recall the evening I realized that, and it took my breath away because I was so certain that I was in this fantastic place in this perfect job that was one of my dream jobs, but it did not feel like a dream. That led me to another period of searching, and in that period of searching, I connected with a god brother who had the previous summer been mountaineering in Alaska with a program through his college. Now, I think a Scotty is much more adventurous than I am. But there was something about the stories he told and the lessons he said he had learned and the pictures he had taken that just appealed to me. It had an allure of possibility and excitement. 6 months later, I embarked on a 94-day wilderness experience. Now, before I go on, you should know that in my first 27 years, I had never intentionally spent the night outside. Never. I can count the one and only time since I was potty trained that I had ever peed outside. My preferred aerobic activity happened in an aerobics classroom. I didn't even exercise outside. And yet, there really was something about the wilderness that made me say yes. Courtesy of my time in the backcountry, plus the work I've done since then, I've realized that though I very much enjoy working with 18 to 22-year-olds, I think they're in a fascinating part of their life. What I really appreciate and what I really put value on is experiential learning. It's the process by which we understand our experiences, make meaning, and then put that meaning into action. I particularly believe in the power of immersive, novel experiences as a way to put ourselves outside of our comfort zones and help us become better, wiser humans. I also believe there's a real difference between trying new things and trying new things for the purpose of learning. Let me give you an example. Every spring I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and when I'm there, I try to take an aerial class. It's a ton of fun. It's a lot of fun in part because I know I probably haven't gotten better in the past 12 months, but I definitely haven't gotten worse. I'm real bad at hanging from a silk. And the thing I've learned from aerial class really is only that when I'm hanging from a silk, my awareness of where my body is in space is pretty bad. In this photo, I thought my hand was like this. My hand was not like that. It was like this. So when I think about putting myself in a challenging experience for the purpose of learning, I think about a handful of things that I'd like to share with you now. The first is I try to pay attention. I try to pay attention to what intrigues me, what mystifies me, what books, what blogs, what articles I'm reading, what podcasts I'm listening to, what I'm watching. What I'm looking for is the theme or the thread that connects them all, especially when they appear pretty disparate at first glance. Back on that college campus in 2006, I kept coming back to the photos of the Alaska mountains. I kept coming back to the idea of doing something really hard. And I kept coming back to the desire to put myself somewhere where I was pretty incompetent. When I've identified that thread I want to tug, then I think about identifying what I want out of the experience. I chose the wilderness not because of the wilderness. Right? I had never camped outside. I didn't really exercise outside. I did not choose the wilderness because of what the wilderness had to offer. I chose the wilderness because I wanted to put myself in an environment in which I couldn't implement my habitual coping mechanisms, specifically the ones I had cultivated in the past 12 months. I knew I needed to break my patterns. I knew I needed a reset. It won't surprise anyone in the room who knows me that I entered into that 94-day experience with specific detailed learning goals. I really like learning goals. Among my learning goals were I wanted to see if I could learn to be competent in an environment where most of what I thought were my useful skills, like doing qualitative research or facilitating all sorts of learning for 18 to 22-year-olds or hosting dinner parties, would probably not be useful. I also wanted to figure out if I could learn to build community from a place of being incompetent. That question burned particularly bright on my first night in the mountains, where I realized that not only was I unable to help set up the tent, but I had no idea how to clean the dish we had used to make dinner. No idea. Combined with learning goals and identifying your wants, I think it's really significant to pay attention and be curious. Early on in my program, I said to a course mate and now dear friend Lexi, that while I really liked her, I wasn't going to pay attention to anything she had to say about plants, because I didn't really like plants. Talk about self-centered. I received some very strong feedback from my course mates that I came across as arrogant and snobby. That my overt attempts to connect everything we were doing to the theory I had learned in school were not useful for them. They wanted to know that I cared as much about them and their goals as I did about me and my goals. That was hard feedback to hear and really useful. I had been trying so hard to contribute that I had forgotten to pay attention to the community we were building and how to be a useful member of it. My course mates and my instructors taught me to pay attention and be curious. They taught me to pick my head up and look at the majestic land we were traveling in. They taught me the difference between a fir and a spruce. Thank you, Lexi. And they taught me that I needed to honor others' goals as much as I wanted to prioritize mine. Another piece of trying to make the most out of an experience, I think, is to make it hard to quit. Now, I understand the irony of this because I just told you that I quit my job to go camping. And what I mean by this is when you're deciding to take on a challenging experience, I at least need to make it hard to walk away, right? There's going to be challenge. I need to make it hard to leave that challenge. I think you can do so by investing substantial time or financial resources, or if you're like me, by picking on your weaknesses. It's still very hard for me to admit failure. You're welcome to ask my partner about that. And so, even on my hardest days in the mountains, the truly uphill both ways and the snow days, I couldn't imagine a reality in which voluntarily leaving the experience was something I wanted to do. That helped me stick with it. I'm telling you a story that's based around quitting your job and spending 94 days in the mountains, and I acknowledge that that is not attractive or accessible for lots of people. There are various ways we can choose challenge in our life. We can take a new job, we can move, we can go back to school. I was telling a friend about this talk this week, and she said, choose challenge? You want me to choose novel challenge? Have you looked at my life recently? It is full of novel challenge. Sometimes we choose challenge, and sometimes challenge chooses us. Regardless of how we come to encounter challenge, I think a lot can be learned from it, particularly when we balance it with support. We all need support. We are not getting through this life on our own. I know that support for me most often comes from trusted others. So before I embarked on the expedition, I sat down with family and friends and essentially went on a listening tour, or that's what I termed it to myself as I drove around the country. People provided me with wonderful words of wisdom, much of which I transcribed in a journal that I kept. My cousin Amy, who's an outdoor enthusiast, sent me a quote that I recited often. It's from Rainer Maria Rilke. It goes, "Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final." I still recite that, and I recite that on anything that is steep, over and over again. Just keep going. No feeling is final. The last piece of the puzzle for me in trying to make the most of experiences is just to give myself some structure. And the structure I like the best is David Kolb's experiential learning model. He says the first step in this is to have the experience, do the thing. The second step he terms reflective observation. I really like how he describes this, because it's not just looking back at everything that happened to you, it's looking for specific data points of interest. Data points that are useful for me usually come with strong emotion, and so I like to ask myself, when did I act defensively? When did I experience joy? Or the one that usually provides good learning is, when did I label someone or something stupid? There's usually some information there. I also like to ask others what their impressions are of me. When did I appear engaged or distant? What communication patterns emerged? When did you see me at my best? This next part, his big words, abstract conceptualization, is actually where you just put meaning on your experience. You think about what's the data that I selected and what does it actually mean? A friend, John Harnato, likes to say he asks himself 3 questions. What is true? What is truer? And what is truest? Let's say you snapped at somebody who interrupted you. Perhaps you did so because you thought they were rude. That might be true. At a truer level, you might have snapped at them because you thought they didn't value your opinion. At the truest level, it might be that not only do you think they didn't value your opinion, but they didn't value you. Whatever meaning you make of the data you selected indicates what you do next, and that's the last part of Kolb's model, the planning step. It's where you identify strategies and tools that you want to use to make the most of your learning. I like this because, as you probably picked up on it, it's a cycle. You can make a plan, have an experience, select new data, make some new meaning, and it just keeps going over and over again. I also like it because you can look at it short term. I'm going to reflect on this evening a lot, let me tell you. Or you can look at it over the long term. I might think about my role in my job at my work over the past few years. The piece I think this model is missing is the act of remembering. I think that even with the best of intentions, in a model like this, it's really easy to get distracted with competing priorities. I'm confident that a lot of you in the audience have your own acts of remembering. Perhaps you are an avid journaler. Good for you. I can never do that. Perhaps you're one of the people who writes down 3 things every day that make you happy, and you revisit that. Perhaps you're the person who has a very detailed outline of a life plan that you follow and go back and edit appropriately. Whatever your act of remembering, I'd like to offer you an additional structure. I like to occasionally write myself a letter, noting what I'm thinking about, what I'm paying attention to, what I'm working on, what I hope I might have accomplished. I pin it up on my bulletin board with the date at which I want to open it. I want to invite you to write yourself a letter. When you returned from intermission, you found on your chair an envelope and a card. If you'll take a few moments before you leave this evening and make some notes about something you're thinking of, or maybe something this evening that really intrigued you, and you put your name and address on the front, I'll mail it to you. Just drop it in the bowl that's by the entrance. I'll send it to you at the end of the summer, and I hope that it might extend your learning process. So, what did I really learn from 94 Days in the Mountains? I learned that I can do anything, and I can learn to do anything, whether it's reading a topographic map or thriving while winter camping. The secret is chocolate. I learned that rapport building is at the heart of any community, and I need to build rapport with my head and my heart. I learned that reflection without action is just as meaningless as action without reflection. I learned that when I am emotionally flooded, I am of no use to anyone. I learned that I need to be challenged, and I actually need to feel challenged. I feel it right here. I learned that everyone has a worst day, and you can always be of service. I learned that following well is just as valuable as leading well. 13 years ago, an intentional leap of faith into an immersive novel experience changed the trajectory of my life. Yours could too. Thank you.